Can watch it on our
Yes, you're
website.
being recorded right now.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Nancy. So let's get started. Um, some of the things that we'll learn about today. You'll learn about the services offered by the Illinois Family Resource Center, which Nancy covered what we do, our services that we offer. I'll go a little bit more into detail as the slides go on. Some statistics regarding child abuse and substance use disorders. We'll learn the definition of what is a substance use disorder and what is child abuse. We'll become familiar with the impact of substance use, that substance use has on child abuse and on families. And then you'll learn about resources available to you for free, and also how to report child abuse. As Nancy said, we are a statewide project, so I won't go too much into this slide because I'll just be repeating what Nancy said. But we do go out into the community to have resources available for the community. We attend conferences with exhibit tables, and we provide resources on substance use disorders, grief, mental health, gambling, problem gambling information, and we have that in Spanish and in English. We post on our website. We have a Facebook page if you want to follow us. We would be more than happy to have you on our Facebook as our Facebook friends. We post in Spanish and in English. We do also the webinars on a monthly basis. We're now starting to offer them in Spanish. Before it was just English webinars being offered. We, like I said, attend conferences, and we also provide research information when requested by organizations that we work with. We help them find information or resources that they need in Spanish and in English. Before getting started, I'd like to acknowledge that this is a very difficult topic for some of us to discuss. So if you need to step away from your computer, take a break, that is totally okay. If you need support after, you can contact us. I'll share my email at the end. If you need resources, we can also provide that. But please take care of yourself. This is a heavy topic because it does deal with children being abused in different ways. So please take care of yourself. You need a break, please take it because it's important to take care of ourselves. So what is substance use disorder? The definition is that it's a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite adverse consequences. So it's a brain disorder. It's considered a brain disorder because of what the substances, the chemicals do to your brain, right? It technically hijacks your brain to think that you need the substance to survive. So the changes that you go through while using a substance can be life-changing even after the person stops using whatever substance of their choice that they're using. Some statistics. So substance use disorders affect over 20 million Americans aged 12 and over. This is pretty alarming because age 12, they're still children, right? So we know that children as young as 12 or maybe even younger are starting to use a substance. The misuse of alcohol accounts for 88,000 deaths annually in the US, and around 64,000 people died from drug overdoses during 2016. That's about 175 overdoses per day. That is why it's very important that we get the word out, we get information out on substance use disorders so that we can help the people who are suffering from a substance use disorder get the help that they need. And so we can also get rid of the stigma that surrounds substance use disorders. So what can it look like? It can be a person who is consuming harmful amounts of alcohol. That person can have a substance use disorder. It can be a person who is dependent on alcohol. They need alcohol or they need a certain drug to survive. They need it. They use drugs or drink alcohol on a regular basis. It can also be a parent with a substance use disorder who isn't able to supervise their children because of their use, their drinking, their drug use. So the children lack that parental supervision. It's very important that we acknowledge that people with the substance use disorder, they come from all communities. It can be your neighbor, it can be your brother, your sister, your daughter, your son. It literally can be anyone because substance use disorders, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you come from, for example, a rich neighborhood or a poor neighborhood. We're exposed to different things. Although genetics and environmental what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry. Like environmental oh my gosh, my mind went blank. Factors play, I'm sorry about that, play a role in the substance use disorder. If you're exposed to it at an early age, you're more likely to use it as an adult. So I am going to briefly go over this table because we'll talk more in detail as we continue the presentation. But I like this table because it shows all the behaviors of or the consequences of a child who has a parent with a substance use disorder. So some of the things that a child can experience are a chaotic home life. Because of the parent that is using a substance. It might be the child is getting exposed to illegal activities if the parent is using illegal drug. The child grows up thinking that they have to be perfect because they don't want to upset the parent. They want to please the parent. They grow up having trust issues because they don't trust other people. They don't trust their parents because of broken promises that they've encountered. And they also sometimes are shy because they don't want anybody else to know what's going on in their house. So they withdraw from like their social group. They might not want to talk or play with friends at school because, they just want to keep to themselves. They don't want nobody to know what they're going through. So, like I mentioned, children who have a parent with a substance use disorder grow up keeping secrets, right? Like the home life is a secret. Nobody outside of our family is supposed to know what's going on because I might get in trouble, or my mom or my dad or my caregiver is going to get in trouble if I say anything that's going on at home. They grow up not trusting people, and they shut down. Sometimes they completely shut down. They don't want to talk to anyone. They refuse to get any support at school sometimes. The teacher might be asking them, questions like, are you okay? Do you want to, I'm here for you. And the child might just completely shut down because they might be scared of what's going to happen if they say, what's going on at home, or they might feel guilty or shame that it might be their fault. The parent might be telling them, well, it's your fault that I'm drinking, or because of you I have to use this drug to let go of my stress, for example. So the child might feel like it's their fault, and so they don't want to share anything with outside people. So children who have a parent with a substance use disorder, and it doesn't have necessarily have to be the parent because of the world that we're living in today. A child can be living with grandma or grandpa, aunt, uncle, so a caregiver, right? The caregiver of a child, and that caregiver is is using a substance, has a substance use disorder, they might see a lot of fighting at home. The child might get physically hurt, sexually abused, be neglected, and then be confused about what they feel and how to act. Because sometimes if they have a parent who is suffering with a substance use disorder, they might not have that parent present emotionally for them. So they don't know how to deal with emotions because they haven't been taught how to deal with emotions. Children need that guidance. They need that example of good behavior, right? Of good interactions with people, of just good behavior in general. And if we don't, as adults, if we don't show that to children, then where are they going to learn it from, right? They need they need that role model, and it's the caregiver, it's the parent. So they're put in unsafe situations. It can be that friends of the mom or dad or the caregiver come over, and the children might not feel comfortable with those people in their house, but they might be exposed to strangers, to people they don't know because of that parent who is using a substance. So we're putting our kids in danger when when they have a parent who has a substance use disorder. And not only is the child getting impacted at the moment that this is happening, that they're witnessing their parent, drinking or using drugs. These impacts last a lifetime, and it affects their mental health later on when they become adults. Parental substance abuse is a risk factor for various forms of child abuse, because of the parent being under the influence. They might not know, they might not realize that what they're doing is harming the child. So it puts the child at risk. Parents and caregivers with a substance use disorder have an increased demand for child welfare services. And in the US, over 8 million children have at least one parent with the SUD. That's a lot of children living in a home where it's chaotic, where they might not feel safe. And we have to remember that as an adult in general, it's our job to keep our children safe. They look to us for that safety, to keep them safe. And if we are not able to do that, then the children, they're put at risk for many things. In Illinois, approximately 49,402 children live with a parent that has a substance use disorder. So this is what we have to really pay attention to. That's a lot of children. And sometimes if you work, depends on what field you work in. But based on my experience as a teacher, when I was in the classroom, I would see a lot of students come into the classroom tired. They wanted to sleep. They were angry. They didn't want to talk. They got into a lot of fights. And oftentimes we dismiss that behavior as like, they're just being kids, they're just being teenagers, or they're just being bad kids. They don't want to listen, they're being rebellious. And we fail to acknowledge that it might be their home life. They might be going through things at home that is impacting their behavior in school. So if you work with children, if you work in the school system, it's very important to acknowledge that, and just don't say, oh well, it's typical behavior. Maybe you might be the only adult that child has that they feel safe with. Or they're just, asking or showing you signs that they want you to ask questions. They want somebody to talk to. And sometimes they do that in various forms. They can use art to express what they're feeling. So it's important to pay attention to all those things, to the drawings, to the writings that they do, because that can be like, you can find signs there. You're not, I'm not asking, or I'm not saying to conduct an investigation, but just be there for the child, right? If you notice that the child is acting differently, be there for that child. Be that safe adult that child can come to and talk to you about, anything that's going on, if they feel comfortable with you. So you have to build that relationship with the children. We do have to remember that parents that are struggling with the substance use are not bad parents. They're not. They love their children. They just they can't control their substance use, because their brain was essentially hijacked by the substance, right? Either alcohol or drugs, that it's controlling them. So it's a disease. There's help and there's a cure for it, but we need to acknowledge that parents are not bad. And sometimes a lot of parents or caregivers, because of the stigma that makes them look like bad people, like bad parents, they refuse to get help. They don't want to go out to get help or seek that support, to help them, because they don't want to get judged, right? If they go ask for help, someone might say, well, you're a bad parent. Like, how could you be drinking in front of your child? Or because you decided to use the money for food, you instead bought alcohol, that makes you a bad parent. Like, I don't think they want to hear that. They want support, right? So let's remember that parents are not bad parents. They just need that support, and they need somebody to say, I'm here for you. I'm here to support you, the best I can, and provide you with resources. Maybe they just need somebody to talk to, about what's going on. And they need some guidance. So let's not be judgmental when we talk about parents who have a substance use disorder. Language is very important, because some language has a very negative connotation, some words have a negative connotation. So let's be mindful of the language that we use when we are talking about substance use disorders, with the families, with the children, because we don't want to keep creating or adding on to that stigma that makes them look like bad people. If you are able to, I would like you to take a picture of this slide. Maybe some of you are familiar with the 7 C's. It's really important that the children know that they didn't cause it. They didn't cause the disorder. They didn't cause the parent to use a substance. They can't control it. They can't cure it, but they can help by taking care of themselves and communicating their feelings, right? So as adults in the children's lives, whether we work with them, whether we have our own children, we need to teach them how to communicate their feelings. We need to teach them how to express what they're feeling, so that they make healthy choices, and they celebrate themselves, right? They should know that if my mom or dad, for example, don't celebrate my accomplishments, I'm gonna celebrate me. I'm gonna be proud of what I'm doing, because children are very, they need information, right? They need information to be able to process it. A lot of times we ignore the child's like thoughts, right? Or feelings, because we might say, well, they're children, they'll get over it. Or they're children, they don't understand what's going on, so I'm not going to bother explaining to them what's going on. But children are very smart. They know what's going on. They need that information to be able to process their emotions and understand that the substance use disorder that their parent has nothing to do with them. Because a lot of times that's why children feel guilty or ashamed, or they shut down because they might feel like it's their fault, something that they did. So we need to really emphasize to the children that it's not their fault, and that their parent, we need to remind them your parent loves you, and we need to support them. So some of you may have seen the pinwheels around the state, throughout the state, because it's April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. Usually, organizations that work with children have these pinwheels outside of their place, in to bring awareness to Child Abuse Prevention Month. Usually, the color blue is used to represent and to bring awareness to Child Abuse Prevention Month. Some of you might be wondering why the pinwheel. Why is this a symbol for Child Abuse Prevention Month? Well, in 2008, Prevent Child Abuse America introduced the pinwheel as like the national symbol for Child Abuse Prevention Month, because the pinwheel symbolizes that playfulness, the joy of childhood, and it's a symbol to represent and to remind us that we want children to have a great childhood. We want children to be to grow up free of abuse. We want them to grow up in a safe home, safe place. We want them to have a caring adult that's caring for them, that's taking care of them. So that is why the pinwheel is used for Child Abuse Prevention Month. So again, please note that this talking about child abuse is it's difficult. Sometimes I still have difficulty talking about this topic because I have children of my own, and I have nieces and I have nephews, and it's difficult to talk about this topic because, again, we're talking about children, right? Sometimes they're as little as, a newborn sometimes, that are getting physically abused. So if you need a break, if you need to step away from the computer, you can mute me if you'd like, because I do want you to take care of yourself. So child abuse is the big umbrella term, but there's different forms of child abuse. A child can be abused physically, sexually, emotionally abused, and neglected. And child abuse applies to anyone under the age of 18. So that under 18 is considered a child. So physical abuse is any physical injury caused to the body of the child by hitting, beating, punching, shaking, kicking, any physical harm to the child. Physical abuse is sometimes the easiest to see on a child, because you'll be able to see the bruises, or the bite marks, right? So that's one of the easiest forms of abuse that you can make a report because it's visible. The other forms of abuse might not have such obvious signs that the child is getting abused. Physical abuse sometimes might not be intentional. It can be an accident, but it's still abuse to the child. If a parent is intoxicated, they might not realize the strength that they have, and they might see that, okay, I just I'm just like yanking my child. I didn't mean to yank so hard or pull so hard, or shove, but it's still considered abuse, because you're harming the child. So we need to be mindful of that, when speaking to parents who have a substance use disorder, that because of their brain not functioning the way it should, they might not realize the harm that they're causing to the child. Child sexual abuse is any activity, any sexual activity with the child. It's important to also remember that it doesn't always have to be an adult with the child. It can also be a child with another child if the other child is exerting power over the other child. That's also considered child sexual abuse. It can be physical touch of child sexual abuse, or it, like, for example, sexual activity, or it can be non-touching forms. So it can be showing a child, exposing the child to pornography. That is child sexual abuse. It can be rape, molestation, unwanted touches toward the child, exposure of the genitalia, forcing the child to masturbate, and or touch the perpetrator, sexual images. That is all considered sexual abuse. And in Illinois, grooming is also considered a sex crime. So grooming behavior, for example, can be, if you notice that an adult is giving special attention to just one child. I'm going to give you an example of a school setting. If you notice that a teacher is always bringing treats to just one child, or offering candy just to one child, that's kind of like a warning sign. It might not be abuse, it might not be that anything is happening, but it can be leading to, right? So that's why it's the grooming. The adult is gaining that child's trust, to then be able to do what they want to do. So we need to be aware of the interactions between adults and children, and even children with other children, because it is possible. So if we work with children, very important to always be watching them, supervising them. If we see something, or some behavior, if we witness some behavior that's concerning with a child, and an adult in our workplace, then we need to step up and say something, right? Either talk to your supervisor about what you witnessed, or talk to the person who's doing that behavior, and ask them questions like, hey, I noticed that you only bring candy to so and so, like why not to everybody else? Or I noticed that you only invite so and so to a special outing, a special field trip, but why not the rest of the children? Because remember that as adults, it's our job to keep our children safe, to keep all the children safe. So if you see something, say something, because again, it might not be that abuse is happening at the moment, but the interactions that you see might be leading to that abuse. Then there's emotional abuse. This is the hardest to tell, when a child is being emotionally abused, because there's no signs, like there's no physical signs, like there is in when the child is being physically abused. There's the emotional abuse is more verbal and psychological abuse to the child. So it's non-physical, and it's behaviors that are meant to control the child. Well, I'm referring to children because it's child abuse, right? But this emotional abuse, any type of abuse, can be for an adult as well. But emotional abuse on a child is sometimes meant to control them, to scare them. And children who are physically or sexually abused are usually emotionally abused as well. So the perpetrator might be sexually abusing the child and use emotional abuse as well by telling the child, you know, if you say something, if you tell someone, they're not going to believe you. They're going to think you're lying. You know, you're dumb for wanting to say something, or you're worthless. No one's going to believe you. And they use that power to control that child. And that child is not going to want to say if abuse is happening because they're scared of the consequences, right? They might not want their family or their parents, their siblings to get hurt, and the perpetrator might be using that to keep the abuse going. Neglect in Illinois is defined as the failure of a parent or caretaker to meet minimal parenting standards for providing adequate supervision, food, clothing, medical care, shelter, or other basic needs to the child. As a parent or caretaker, we have responsibilities, right, with our children. Like I keep saying and I keep repeating, it's our job to keep our children safe. It's our job to have a safe place for them to live, to sleep, clean clothes. If they're sick, take them to the doctor. You know, take them to school every day, because there's different types of neglect, and I'll talk about it on my next slide. So there's different forms of neglect, educational neglect, not taking the child to school. If a parent or a caregiver has a substance use disorder, they might not be able to take the child to school. So the child is missing school. The child is not getting the proper education because of that parent who is not capable of taking the child to school. There's emotional neglect, not providing enough emotional support to the child. There's environmental neglect, not providing a safe place, a clean space for the child to live in, to sleep in. There's medical neglect, not taking the child to the doctor when they're sick, or not taking the child to the doctor for regular checkups or annual checkups. That's neglect towards the child. And then there's developmental neglect. That's when the child is not given enough emotional support, enough physical stimulation. Then that impacts their how they develop, their developmental stages. We have to remember that neglect is a form of abuse. So any neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, you as an adult, I'm sure that all of us on this call are mandated reporters. We have to report it. We have to make that report, because if we ignore it, that child is going to continue with that abuse. I was working last year. When I started working at the advocacy center, I would go into schools to give lessons on body safety to children. And there was one child during a lesson that we were talking about safe and unsafe touches, and that is the most difficult lesson to teach, to give to students. A lot of teachers sometimes are uncomfortable because they lack the training. And I'm not saying that teachers are, responsible for teaching the kids that behavior, the unsafe and safe touches. but because of lack in that particular school, because of the lack of education that the teachers had on that subject, I went in to give these lessons. And so we were talking about safe and unsafe touches, and a child, it was second grade, a child disclosed to me. And so it's sometimes it's hard. I don't know if some of you on the call have have been in a situation where a child discloses to you. So it's very important that you make that report. If I wouldn't have been there, I don't know. I don't know if that child obviously felt comfortable in the setting that he was in to want to disclose to me. And so I made the report. I made the report. I didn't conduct an investigation. I just made the report with the information that I had, and I let DCFS handle the rest. But again, our job as adults, mandated reporters, we do have to make those reports, even if it's uncomfortable for us. We have to have those conversations. We have to make those reports when we witness an abuse. We have to make that report. So we need to get out of our comfort zone and do that to keep that child safe. So if you can quickly answer this question, you can just type your response in the chat. What does child sexual abuse include? A, beating, B, sexual penetration, C, biting, D, exposing a child to pornography, or E, both B and D. Just type in the letter in the chat, please. Yes, I see a lot of E's. It's both sexual penetration and exposing a child to pornography. A lot of times people sometimes forget that, or they don't consider a child being exposed to pornography as child sexual abuse, but it is. Sexual images, showing that to a child, that's considered child sexual abuse. Danielle, I saw your question in the Q&A. We're gonna talk about that later on. So I'll answer that later on in the presentation. Okay, here's another example. And I want you just to think about this. A baby, age 6 months, has had a severe cough for at least 2 weeks. It has gotten so bad that her whole body seems to seize up when she coughs. She wheezes and seems exhausted. You are very concerned about her health and have expressed your concerns to her mom. Mom just keeps saying, it's gonna get better. The doctor would just tell me it's a cold and there's nothing they can do. It's a waste of time taking her to the doctor. I'm not gonna waste my time taking her to the doctor when I already know what the doctor's gonna tell me. Would this be considered neglect? Yes or no? Put it in the chat. Would this be considered neglect? Yes, I see a lot of yeses. So yes, it's considered medical neglect. The mom is not providing the necessary medical care to her baby, because she's refusing to take her to the doctor. Same thing, if my daughter would be complaining of a pain, and I would just ignore it, like, oh, you'll get over it, it's okay. But the pain is just there and there and there. I'm neglecting her. I need to take her to the doctor because it can be something more serious, something severe, and I am just refusing to take it to the doctor. So that is medical neglect. So abuse and neglect affect the brain development as the child is growing. It affects the areas that control the emotions. Children develop their emotion regulation through interactions with adults. If they do not have positive interactions when they are growing up, they won't know how to deal how to deal with their emotions and how to express them as they get older. So some of the impacts of abuse and neglect on the child's brain is they can have difficulty concentrating and learning. So again, if you work with children in the school system, or if you work with children in other areas and other fields, sometimes you might have children who have a difficulty concentrating. They just won't focus. They're not focused when you're, saying something, when you're teaching something. They're not focusing, or you notice that they're really behind in their learning. Again, it might be that something else is going on, right? Trauma, something going on at home that's not letting them be able to do their best in school. So we need to be mindful of all those behaviors that the child is showing in the classroom, or where in whatever field you work with children. You might also see children who have a difficulty feeling safe. They just feel unsafe. You might see them, like, always looking around, always, if you touch them, if you touch their hand, they might like get startled and jump. They might have a difficulty calming down, sleeping. It might be due to abuse. It might be due to neglect. Not all the time. I mean, sometimes it can be just that they need extra support, right? Or they need that extra nurturing. But a lot of times it is because of the trauma that they've experienced. You might see children who have a hard time managing emotions, have a lot of outbursts. They might get really angry. Again, asking questions, right? Being there for the child, letting them know that you are there if they want to and need to talk about anything, instead of just being dismissive and like this typical teenage behavior or children's behavior. They'll get over it. They're just going through a tantrum. Sometimes, again, it's something deeper that if we don't pay attention to, a lot of times I myself have said, my daughter's just going through, the terrible twos, or a tantrum. She got mad because I didn't buy her something. But we need to teach our children how to manage their emotions, right? Because if it could be just a tantrum, it could be just they're upset because they didn't get the toy that they wanted. And the way they react is just it's the only way they know how to react, because they haven't been taught how to manage their emotions, how to deal with difficult situations. So children need to be taught that good expression, how to express their feelings in a healthy way. Child abuse and neglect are common. It's more common than what we think. At least 1 in 7 children have experienced child abuse or neglect in the past year, in the United States. In 2020, about 1,750 children died of abuse and neglect in the United States. Again, this is a big number, but we have to remember that there could be more cases of children who are experiencing child abuse, and it's just not being reported. And there could be a lot of reasons why the abuse is not being reported or doesn't get reported. So although this is an alarming number, let's remember that it's more likely a bigger number, but because abuse doesn't get reported all the time, we don't really know exactly what the numbers are. About 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused by the time they are 18. So again, going back to the classroom reference, if you have a group of, let's let's be basic, a group of 4 girls. You have a small group, it's a reading group, you teach the 4 girls, at least one out of those 4 girls will be sexually abused by the time they are 18. And boys, it's 1 in 6. Think about the little kids, the children that are in your family. It's concerning, and it doesn't get any better. The world that we live in sometimes doesn't allow for the abuse to get reported for many reasons. The child might not want to disclose, so they don't say anything, so that abuse doesn't get reported. Sometimes the abuse happens within the family, and it's we can't say anything, right? We can't report it. It can be an uncle. Going on to the next point, 90% of children who are sexually abused are abused by someone they know. It can be an uncle, an aunt, a brother, a sister, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. That's where abuse happens the most. We teach our children about stranger danger, and that is great. But we also need to teach our children that family can also cause that abuse, or we need to teach our children that not everyone is a safe adult, right? So we need to teach our children the behavior that they need to be mindful of so that they can keep themselves safe. Only 10% of children are abused by a stranger. The reason why the the abuse happens most of the time with somebody that they know is because that person has built that trust with that child, with the family. So the parents trust that person, right? It can be the babysitter. They've gained that trust. It can be a teacher. The parents trust that teacher. And so that abuse is never suspected from that person because, believe it or not, a lot of times we think that, well, that's my uncle, he wouldn't harm me, or that's my aunt, she wouldn't do anything to me, to hurt me. So we need to teach our children that no one is allowed to touch their private body parts unless it's a doctor, to keep them safe, to keep them healthy, and that is with a parent present. So it's really important that we teach our children that. 70% of children who are sexually abused never tell anyone. They're ashamed, they're embarrassed, they're scared for many reasons. They don't disclose. So that kind of goes back to that number, right? It can be bigger because there's a lot of cases that don't get reported. And not only is it damaging to the child at the moment, but it lasts their entire lifetime. So again, we need to show that support to the child, to our children. Abuse happens in all communities. Rich, poor, north side, south side, city, suburban. It happens in all communities. It can happen in our own home. It can happen with family. So we need to be aware of those interactions between adults and children, or children with children. Experiencing poverty can place a lot of stress on families, which increases the risk of that child being abused or neglected, because parents are stressed, right? A lot of times parents especially if they have a substance use disorder, they they'd rather sometimes go out and use that money to buy their substance than provide for the child or provide for their children a proper home or proper place to live, food. That child is experiencing neglect, not being fed, not having clean clothes. So that has a lot to do with their economic, their financial status. So they're more prone to being abused. A parent with a substance use disorder is 3 times more likely to physically or sexually abuse their child. I touched on this earlier, because their brain is hijacked by the substance. They might not realize what they're doing. They might not realize the force or the power that they're using on the child. So that causes a child to have a damaged perception of family. They think that family is supposed to keep them safe. Family members are not supposed to cause any harm to the child. So that's the mentality of how children see adults, right? How children see family, how children see parents. Children love their parents. They love them. And they expect that level of, like, my parent's gonna keep me safe. My parent wouldn't do anything to harm me. But under the use of a substance, again, that parent might not have control of what they're actually doing. So then that perception of, well, I thought my parent was supposed to keep me safe, or I thought my grandma was supposed to keep me safe. Kind of, the child doesn't know what to think now. She was my mom, she's my mom, and she did this to me, or my dad. It also causes them to have a damaged perception of their body. Like, why they might blame themselves. Why did that happen to me? Like, why me? And then in general, the safety of the world that they live in. Again, children are very vulnerable, and they look for the adults in their lives to keep them safe. So if they experience abuse, that perception of safety is damaged. They don't know who to trust. They don't know if the next adult that comes into their lives, or that they interact with, is going to harm them, or is there to keep them safe. Children who have experienced abuse are more likely to have externalizing disorders such as anger, aggression, and behavioral problems. And children who experience neglect are more likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, poor peer relations. So they struggle. And I'm gonna pick up my pace a little bit. So how does substance use affect the parental role? So parents use the money for food. Parents spend a lot of their time seeking out drugs versus spending time with the kids. And then oftentimes family time is spent using alcohol and or drugs. So the child is always seeing that parent using alcohol or using drugs instead of spending quality time with them. The relationship between abuse and substance use disorders later on in life. So not only is the abuse the child is exposed to at an early age affecting them at the moment, but it leads to mental health problems later on in life. I was going to show this video, but I couldn't get the audio to work. So when you get the copy of the slides, I will also include the link to this video. So in this video, Tanya Kane, also known as Neen, she describes her early childhood life that she had with her mother. Her mother had a substance use disorder. Her mother physically abused her as a child, and her mom also allowed her male friends to sexually abuse her daughter. So she was 9 years old when she first experienced sexual abuse. And that was, again, her mother. Her mother allowed that abuse. And our mother is supposed to keep us safe, right? So she grows up, with being exposed to drugs, to alcohol, to abuse. And so she shares a little bit about her story. It's a really impactful video. So I am going to send you the link so that you can watch it. I'm sorry that I couldn't play it. So substance abuse problems, beginning in childhood or adolescence, are some of the most common consequences of sexual abuse. Because the children are looking for a way to cope, they turn to drugs or alcohol to make them feel better, to make them feel happy, even if it's just temporary. They look for that. They look for that level of happiness, of just getting away from the trauma, and learn, and just that's how they deal with it, because again, they don't know how else to deal with it because they've never been taught that. Oops. Adolescents and adults struggling will often turn to drugs and alcohol, again, because of the trauma. So whenever you have an interaction with an adult who has a substance use disorder, there's always an underlying issue, right? And it's important to get to the roots of what's going on, because oftentimes they are just using that alcohol or that drug to just get away from their real world, right? When they're high, or when they're feeling happy because of the alcohol, they forget about their trauma. They forget that it's there. They forget about their problems. So they use it as a coping mechanism. So it's important to really talk to the people, to the clients, if you see clients, to our community, to our family, to let them know that there's support and there's help. They don't have to resort to a substance use to be able to cope with their trauma. All children respond differently to sexual abuse. Some children who are sexually abused might not show any signs that they're sexually abused, because again, they've developed coping mechanisms, or defensive mechanisms to not let anybody know. Because again, they might feel, if somebody finds out, if I tell someone, I'm gonna get in trouble, it's my fault, or my family's gonna get in trouble, or if it's a family member who's doing the abuse, they might go to jail. I'm not going to say anything. So not all children are going to respond to abuse in the same manner. Some behavioral changes that you should be aware of in children, that could be indicators that they're being sexually abused, are a sudden change in behavior or personality. If you notice that the child was very social, and all of a sudden they're very quiet, they don't want to talk to anyone, check in with them. Something's going on. Depression or anxiety, withdrawing from family or friends, or they don't want to do anything. That's a warning sign. Acting aggressively. All of a sudden they become very aggressive. Talk to them, check in. Is there anything you want to talk about? Showing a sudden fear of certain people. Maybe they don't want to be around their uncle anymore, or they don't want to be around their brother anymore. All of a sudden, they just like they're scared of being around that person, or they don't want to go to someone's house. They don't want to go to a certain place. That's a warning sign. Again, sometimes it can be nothing, right? It really can be nothing, but most of the time it's something that's going on with the child. Acting younger than their age, if you notice that the child is regressing in their behavior. For example, if they were potty trained and all of a sudden they start having accidents again, something's going on. They have trouble sleeping. They have more sexual knowledge than they should have for the age that they are. And they have self-destructive behaviors. They are self-harming. That's the way that they cope with their trauma, or that's the way they're coping with that abuse. A lot of times you'll see if it's older kids who are being abused, sometimes you might see them putting on extra layers of clothing because they might think, well, if I'm wearing all this clothes, the perpetrator might not, want to do anything to me because I'm wearing all this clothes. Or it can be they stop showering, they stop taking care of themselves. Same thing. They might think, well, if I don't smell nice, if I don't, look nice, the perpetrator might not want to abuse me. Self-harm is very it's some children who do it, you might not notice any sign. And again, some you might, and that might be their cry for help. So we should always be looking at how children are behaving. Some physical signs of abuse, difficulty walking or sitting. They complain that they have pain in their private areas. They have frequent bladder infections. They have painful bowel movements. This can all be a sign of abuse. Stomach aches, and pregnancy in adolescence. Stomach aches sometimes are dismissed as, oh, well, something you ate, right? But if it's continued stomach ache, stomach pains, headaches, it can be the stress of the trauma that's causing those aches. So again, be mindful of any sign that you see that's out of the ordinary for a child, and check in. And if you need to make that report, make that report. Some behavior is typical, right? So for example, if you notice that an adolescent is just they're not spending enough time, or they're not spending as much time as they used to with family, to be with friends, that's kind of normal. But if you notice that they're withdrawing from family and friends and they don't want to do anything, that's concerning. They want more privacy. That's typical. They're growing up, they just want more privacy. But if you notice that they're becoming secretive, or they're hiding something, that's concerning. If you notice that they move from, like, playing with the Barbie to not wanting to play with Barbies anymore, that's typical. They're growing up. But if you notice that they lose interest in all activities, and they don't want to do anything else, they don't pursue anything else, that's concerning. So again, check in. Child abuse also has mental health effects on a person. And these can last a whole lifetime. But again, we have to remind people that there's help, there's support. Children who are abused can overcome it. They're very resilient. If we offer them the support and the resources necessary, they're very resilient. Adult women who are sexually abused as a child are more likely to suffer from depression. Adults who were abused as children are also more likely to attempt to commit suicide. And then male survivors, more than 70% seek psychological treatment. So they ask for help. They look for those resources. And not only mental health problems, but also health problems. A child who experience sexual abuse, when they grow up, they can have health problems such as diabetes, stroke, hypertension, heart problems, cancer, and this can all be because of that stress of the trauma that's causing these health problems. We have to remember that even though this is it's happening to children, children are being abused, it's preventable. It's preventable by us as adults. We need to have that conversation with children. We need to have that conversation with other adults about behavior that's acceptable and unacceptable with children. We need to be aware of children, the way they interact with adults, the way adults interact with children, the way children interact with other children. If we work together as a community to keep our children safe, we can prevent it from happening. So some resources for the recovery process and support for families. So I want you to make sure that when you are working with children, let the kids know that it's okay to feel angry, validate their feelings, remind them that it's not their fault. The abuse that happened to them is not their fault. Model healthy behavior, and show them ways that they can express their feelings in a healthy way, express their emotions in a healthy way, and also have that open conversation with children about that they have like they have someone that they can trust, and let that be you. Let that be the adult in their lives that is there to keep them safe and that is there to listen, because you can only control your environment, right? If a child is with you and they feel safe, let them know that you're a trusting adult. They can come to you if they need to talk about something that's going on. As a professional, some of the things that you can do is support the child or family in building relationships with other community providers and members. Help them find resources if they need to. Some parents, some families don't know where to start looking for services or resources. So be that person that can provide that to the families. Teach and model positive behavior, positive communication skills. Show children respectful ways to solve problems. Again, as adults, we need to model that positive behavior, that healthy behavior, so that as they grow up, they know how to deal with their different emotions, and help the child feel lovable and capable. Again, you might be the only adult that child has, that they trust, they feel comfortable with. So keep that relationship. Let the child know that you care and that you're there. As a caregiver, you can help lessen the impact of trauma in children by telling them you love them no matter what. Setting firm, reasonable, and age-appropriate boundaries. Children need boundaries. Teaching children the correct the correct terms for their private parts. That is really important, because I'm going to give you another quick example. When I was working at the advocacy center, there was a case where a little girl was being sexually abused, and she went to school and she told her teacher that her uncle ate her cookie. And well, cookie is just a cookie, right? To a person, if you say a cookie, it's just a cookie. And so it was several days that the girl kept going back to school and saying that her uncle ate her cookie. Her uncle ate her cookie. Turns out that her uncle was sexually abusing her. And she was referring to her vagina as the cookie because that's the term that her mom had showed her or told her. She referred to her vagina as her cookie. So when the case was investigated, turns out they couldn't really do anything because the little girl that was being abused was saying that the uncle, it was the cookie. So there was nothing they can do. So the case was dropped, the investigation was dropped because the little girl wasn't referring, like there was no evidence, right? No, the girl said it was just the cookie. So it's really important that as parents, as caregivers, we teach our children the proper names for their body parts, so that they know how to keep themselves safe, and they know that no one is supposed to touch their private body parts unless it's a doctor to keep them healthy, and that's with a parent in the room. And again, just being aware of the children's behavior, their progress. If you notice that they're regressing, those are all signs that something is going on. It's also important to model, if a parent is taking medication for something, model that responsible use of the medicine, because we have to remember that people can become addicted to prescription medicine, to pain medication. So we need to model that healthy use of the medication for what it's for pain, for example. Plan regular fun, spend time with the children, arts and crafts, color, read a book, spend one-on-one time with your child, and just being present and making sure that you are aware of everything that's going on with the child. Children want to love their parents. They also need to know they did not cause the addiction and it is never their fault. This is really, really important to keep reminding the children of this. Disclosures. Oftentimes it takes children weeks, months, years, or even their entire lifetime to reveal their abuse. And this is because they're scared, they feel ashamed, they're being threatened by the perpetrator. They may not know how to express the abuse. They don't know the words. They don't want anything to happen to their parents, to the perpetrator. So there's a lot of different reasons why sometimes children don't disclose right away, or they don't disclose at all. The majority of abuse, even after disclosure, is not reported to authorities. So again, just a reminder, we are, if you're a mandated reporter, you are required to make that report. And honestly, you don't even have to be a mandated reporter to make that report. If you see abuse, if you witness abuse, you can call and make that report. If a child discloses to you, what should you do? Again, listening to a disclosure can be very difficult and heavy for you to take in. So just support the child. Listen to them. Avoid saying things that imply blame. Stay calm and validate the child's feelings. Don't fill in the blanks for the child, because you want that child to tell you what happened, and you're using the same details, the same words that child used to disclose to you to make that report. So just listen. Just listen, and make that report. Things you can say to them is, how can I help? I've noticed that you seem more upset than usual. Do you want to talk about anything? Be aware of your body language and of saying things that imply blame. Very important, because sometimes our body language says a lot. Sometimes our body language says more than our actual words. So if a child is coming to you to disclose, and you react in a way like you you can't believe it, or like you're overwhelmed, that child might feel like, whoa, you know what, never mind, forget it, nothing happened. I forgot what I was going to tell you, because they're scared. So be mindful of your body language. After the disclosure, thank the child for telling you. Assure them that what happened was not their fault, and then tell them you believe them. It's very important to tell them you believe them. And as a caregiver or somebody that works with children, always tell the child, if something is happening, and you go to an adult and you tell that adult, and that adult doesn't believe you, you keep going to a different adult until somebody believes you. So it's very important that if a child comes to you to disclose, believe them, and make that report. Like I said, children are very resilient, so they can overcome the abuse with the help and support from family, from providers, from the community. They can overcome that. How to report child abuse and neglect online. You can do it online. If it's not an emergency, you can go to childabuse.illinois.gov and make that report. If you believe that it requires immediate assistance, that child is in danger, call the hotline, 1-800-25-ABUSE. Or if that child's life is in danger, call 911. But always make that report. Don't say, well, maybe they told somebody else can do it. Or I don't feel comfortable making this report. I'm not going to do it. Make the report. When you make the report, you are entitled to know if the report is denied, and the reasons why it was denied. You also have the right to speak to a supervisor if you don't agree with the decision. And you are immune from any legal actions if you make that report in good faith. So if you make that report because you witnessed it, or you saw signs on the child, or the child disclosed to you, you're making that report in good faith. You're immune from any legal action that parent might pursue. So please make that report. Do not be scared of what's going to happen after. You are not investigating. You are just making that report, and you are leaving it to DCFS, to the authorities, to make that investigation. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, it's really important to take care of yourself when helping people who have a substance use disorder, or who experienced abuse. So please take care of yourself, take breaks, learn strategies to manage your stress, recognize when you're stretched too thin, and learn how to say no. That's really important, because sometimes as providers, as caregivers, we always think, well, I need to be there. I need to help. I need to, do this. I need to do that. But it's okay to take care of you, to take a breather, to take a step back and take care of you, because you need to be okay and healthy to be able to help others. And the children need you. The children that you serve, the children in your families, they need you, and they need you healthy so that you're able to support them. Some resources that I have to share with you are, if you have not visited Sesame Street Communities, they have excellent resources that are free, that are printable, and you can share with families that you serve, with children that you serve. They have videos that are child friendly, explaining what parental addiction is. They have different topics, so I highly suggest that you visit this website for free resources. Some books that I recommend that you read or get a copy of. This one is Off Limits. So it's a parent's guide to keeping kids safe from sexual abuse. A lot of times parents don't know how to have that conversation and how to start it. So this book really guides you with age appropriate suggestions on how to talk to children about sexual abuse. Building Resilience in Children and Teens. This book offers coping strategies to help children and teens deal with stress due to different things, academics, media. Social media is very big with teens, so that causes stress, peer pressure, family tension. So this is another good read. My Voice is My Superpower. This book helps children know about their body safety rules and how to speak up if someone is touching them in a unhealthy way. This is very small, but I wanted to include this because, like I mentioned earlier, the language that we use when speaking to people with a substance use disorder matters, and it matters to get rid of that stigma. So please be mindful of the language that you use when talking to people. So, and for example, instead of using addict or user, junkie, call them a person with a substance use disorder, person with an opioid use disorder, an alcoholic. Call them person with alcohol use disorder, because again, that language sometimes makes that person shy away from receiving or asking for help because they feel like they are being judged. Some websites where you can find a ton of free information on substance use disorders, on child abuse. The Mama Bear Effect, I believe they still have a kit that if you are a provider or work in a medical setting, they send you a free kit of information that you can put out in your office, and it's all free. They do sell, the Mama Bear Effect does have some items for sale on their website, but most of their resources are free. So you will get a copy of all these links, so that you can have all these resources when you are in need of finding information for your families that you serve, for the children that you serve, or for your own personal use. So just a reminder, child abuse, you need to report it. Neglect is also a form of abuse. You need to report it. Know the signs. Educate yourself on the signs of depression, of anxiety, of other mental health disorders, so that you can help that child, so that we don't just dismiss that behavior as a tantrum or as they're just being teenagers. And always, always, always offer that support to that child. Report the abuse, believe the child, report the abuse, and follow up with that child. Because again, you might be that only adult who is a safe adult to that child. And one last thing, I have one more minute. To get rid of the stigma around substance use disorders or child sexual abuse, let's share our stories. When you feel comfortable sharing, share your stories, so that people know that they are not the only ones suffering or going through the disorder by themselves. They have support. So please share, support others. We are a community. Let's help each other out. And this is a grounding exercise. I just want you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes and just repeat after me. My name is, you say your name. I am safe right now. I am in the present, not the past. I am located in wherever you are located. The date is, and you fill in the date. So if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, let's go ahead and do this grounding exercise. My name is, and you don't have to say it out loud if you're in your office, but my name is Christina. I am safe right now. I am in the present, not the past. I am located in my home. The date is April 10th, 2024. And take care of yourselves, please. Very, very important. Thank you. I'm sorry that I kind of rushed towards the end, but you are able to see this recording. It'll be posted on our website. There will also be a survey. Once we close out the presentation, a survey will pop up. If you can please complete it, it'll help our future webinars, our future trainings that we provide, and it helps with our funding. And it helps with showing what kind of services we provide to the community, to professionals. So please take the survey. Thank you so much again for joining me. I really appreciate you spending your Wednesday morning with me. If there's anything that you need, any support, any resources, my email address is on this slide. You can email me with any questions you might have. If I didn't answer any of your questions, you can follow up with me. Send me the question through email and I will respond. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you, everyone.